I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Today on Hard Knocks, I interview my friend Michael Moynihan, who is a journalist, a cultural critic, a media commentator, and host or co-host of the Fifth Column and host of the Moynihan Report, podcasts that offer a smattering of political commentary, cultural analysis, and investigative journalism. Michael has had a prolific career. He's worked at Vice News, he's worked at the Daily Beast, he's worked at Reason Magazine, he's worked at the Free Press, and he's known for being someone who questions orthodoxy, who defends heterodox views, even in environments that can be costly. And in this conversation, we talk about what it means to cultivate intellectual curiosity, intellectual courage, and the times that he has been afraid to do so. So if you're interested in a conversation about how to think for yourself and how to communicate your ideas in the world, and especially in the face of fear of judgment, this is going to be a great conversation. Enjoy. How about we get started? I'm going to do a little slight introduction of you before the thing. So after we have a chat and you get off, I'll do a little introduction thing that we'll add to the beginning.
Yeah. Just promise me it's going to be fair and not okay.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
he's a sociopath, idiot or something. I don't know. You could say a lot of things.
No. In fact, I was going to talk to you exactly about this, your journey as somebody who might be feared, might fear some unfair treatment. I mean, it's so interesting that you even bring that up. Why, where is that coming from, a comrade Moynihan?
I think that's deeply in my DNA that, it's funny that, from the admonition of somebody in my house one time, a former partner, was that I'm not allowed to read comments or responses to tweets. And you are somebody, Amanda, who I would recommend that of because people are horrible. But me, they don't really care. But just the slightest thing sends me into a bit of a tailspin. So yeah, I get worried about those things. About those things. But it's probably, I didn't in the past. It's sort of as I've gotten older and been a journalist longer and longer, people have gotten more vicious. It's just a fact. It's, more access to the people who you're reading, right? And the people you see on TV. And, I go on like Bill Maher's show, for instance, and then I shut my phone off for 3 days because there's no positive that's coming out of that because, you get in there and you're a wrestling villain if you say the wrong thing, and then your phone is just flooded. So I don't love that stuff at all. It's the part of the job I hate the most. So,
yeah. That's so interesting that I came to know of your existence through Jon Ronson, our mutual friend, Jon Ronson.
One of the greatest people alive. I love Jon Ronson, yeah.
He's the best. I love him so much. And you were a big part of his book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, not because you were at risk of being publicly shamed, but because, can you give like a slight story about how you ended up being a part of that book?
Yeah, I think we're all at risk of being publicly shamed these days. Doesn't matter what we do. But in that case, I had been given the keys to somebody's column at the Washington Post for the summer. And I was writing, and I started reading this book by a guy named Jonah Lehrer, who, he's one of these pop science writers. And there was a chapter in it about Bob Dylan. And I happen to be a psychotic nerd about a lot of things, but Bob Dylan is like top of that list. And I just read it and said, that's not right. And I dug into it and I contacted Jonah, who is at that point a very, very popular writer. He'd just been hired as a staff writer for The New Yorker. And there'd been a little controversy around that because he had been accused of self-plagiarism. Have you ever heard of this? This is like, you wrote something and you kind of reuse it. As my journalist friend said at the time, it's like being accused of stealing food from your own refrigerator. It's like, it's not a big deal. Come on.
Why would that? Who's at harm of that? Okay, all right.
Well,
anyway.
It's a bit of an indicator of certain things, though, because it turned out that Jonah had been a little dishonest with a lot of his writing. And I discovered this, and I'm a bit notorious for this. I don't know why. I don't know why I do it. I don't go out looking for plagiarists, but I just constantly find them because I have this like obsessive compulsive thing about like if I see something that doesn't quite square, I'm always looking up and where it comes from. And oftentimes when you do that, I say, oh, it's the exact same language of the place that it came from. So I'd written about this stuff a lot. And how I ended up getting in John's book was an entirely convoluted saga of getting him to admit that he had made stuff up. And there was a lot of really weird wrinkles in it. And most of it's in John's book, actually. But the response to Jonah, was one of those early examples of people really enjoying his downfall. And at some point, he gave an apology, which was not much of an apology, to be honest. And it was at a conference in front of these two very large monitors. And it was a participatory thing. So if you wanted to do the hashtag while you were watching this live at home on your laptop, he was framed by these comments that were brutal, like absolute brutality. And right before that, I had given an interview, because this story, by the way, I just thought it was going to be like, oh, that's interesting. It was consumed like 3 media cycles. And at a certain point, I had to stop doing interviews about it because it was just crazy. I mean, the media is so navel-gazing, and we love talking about ourselves, and they love watching someone fall, particularly somebody young, pretty good looking, had a house in the Hollywood Hills that was designed by the great mid-century modern architect Julius Schulman. I mean, he had everything, right? So people really enjoyed it. And I said at the very beginning, when someone interviewed me, that I really hated what was happening to him. And I was really uncomfortable. And I had said to my then wife, I talked to her about it the other day, actually, too, who's still a very good pal of mine, just for the record. And I said to her, I was like, I don't know if I want to pull the trigger on this because of I think what's going to happen to him is going to be bad. And I think he understood that too. And he had sent me the previous night, I think 27 or 28 text messages or calls. And it had 28 missed calls from Jen. I said, this is a guy in a full panic. And I control his fate in a way. And I didn't love that idea of doing that. And so oftentimes when I say this, like I'm the one who did this to Jonah Lehrer, with a bit of resignation, I always have to correct myself and say, no, Jonah Lehrer did it to himself, and I'm the one who discovered it. So yeah, when that happened, that whole shaming process, I think John was interested because of how bad I felt about it. And I still do. And we've, I think, emailed once. And I was going to LA. He lives in LA. And I said, maybe we should get together and have a coffee or a drink or something. A drink probably more appropriate.
Yeah.
And he agreed. And then it kind of disappeared. So yeah, it was a weird story that kind of consumed a lot of my life. And then typically what I do, and when I've written about and what I filmed when I was, working for the Vice show and the HBO show, it was never something that was going to have an enormous consequence from one day to the next. The second I pressed send on that, his life that he had built in journalism was over the next day. So yeah, it was. And so John had that at the beginning of the book. And he's repeatedly told me, and I don't think he's lying because he's not a guy that does that it was his kind of favorite story in the book because it was kind of the most complicated one.
Absolutely. I mean, especially for you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that very brief version, because I think you're right. Like I think it really, I think obviously he related to you because he, as a journalist himself, is thinking about like, how do I, what's my role as a journalist and how do I maintain my integrity as a journalist while also understanding that there are the consequences of journalism and participating in this world of commentary and information. And yeah, that's something that I wanted to talk to you about today, which is why I'm glad I wasn't actually intending to ask you about that story, but it sort of leads into this because, you do have a very distinctive voice as a journalist, right? Like, how would you describe your distinctive voice? What is the Moynihan agenda?
It's like that moment when you're like applying or in an interview for a job, and it's required of you to be completely pompous, and you're like, God, I hate doing this. But my voice, which has changed a lot, right? And it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody the other day on a radio show about the whole Charlie Kirk situation. And I said, one of the things that I find odd about it is we do this kind of offense archaeology of trying to find the things that people said in the past that can justify the horrible things that happened to them or mitigate it in your mind in some way. And I had this idea that, because he started it when he was like 17 or 18 years old. And, I didn't know much about him. It wasn't my kind of universe. But some of these quotes are from there were like, he was like 19. And it's like one of the great things about life and about journalism is allowing that sort of evolution. I mean, we change our minds. I mean, Amanda Knox does not have the same views when she's 18 as when she does today. I think that's fairly clear and obvious. And that's the problem with journalism is you put all of your mistakes and all of your weird ideas on the record. So if someone wanted to do that to me, I'm on air how many hours a week? It's like there's a lot of things I fuck up on. There's a lot of things I get wrong. There's a lot of things I'm really, really apologetic about later. And I try very, very hard if I make a mistake to correct it. And even if it's the smallest mistake. I mean, I made a mistake the other day. I had a friend of mine on the show, and she was a CNN contributor, then a Fox News contributor. And I said, in the email went out to listeners, Fox News contributor. I said, that was a long time ago. What the fuck is wrong with you people? To people on my staff. And I was wrong. She went back. And I apologized twice on the show for it because I feel so bad getting these things wrong. It's like, this is what we do. We don't want to get things wrong. But I think that voice has changed. And one of the weirdest ones is I was kind of known when I was at the Vice HBO show for being a bit of a combative interviewer, but not in a sort of Bill O'Reilly or whatever way, like needlessly so, or in a sense that's like, performative. I would just like get into it and get annoyed when I thought people were being dishonest. I don't do that anymore. It's very, very odd. No, not really.
That's so interesting. Yeah, why that shift? Why that softening?
I cannot figure it out. I think it's maybe my daughter. I think it's maybe part of it. Because when you don't have a kid, you don't think like, oh, she's going to see this someday. Or she's going to, like, I think about all the things. I had this crazy thought. I know you're a child too. You're
with
not, you're,
child,
you're
yes, I am.
With child. Well, you're with the child, I hope.
Yeah,
but you're not currently, it's not another one there.
This is not an announcement. No.
Wait, are we announcing something?
No.
You're pregnant? Did I just
No,
meet?
I'm not.
Okay.
I really hope not.
Oh, thank God. Keep me down. I got to talk to Chris about this. This is a little too much. No, I had this. I bought a book. Mm-hmm. It was a used book at a used bookstore in somewhere out in the sticks. And I was reading it and I put it back on the shelf. But in the book, there were all these underlinings because I bought somebody else's book. And I was like, this is the crazy brain. I was like, I want to put a note on this for my daughter if she ever picks it up because those are really dumb underlinings. I don't want her to think they're mine, right? Like I am worried about what my kid is going to think about me. Always. And I wonder if in some ways that's pulled me back. But I think the other thing is as we've gotten crazier in this kind of political culture, and everybody is politicized. I mean, I don't need to know what the guy that I went to high school thinks about and never talked to in high school thinks about Charlie Kirk. I don't need to know that, but I do know it. And I didn't know where these people lived 20 years ago. And so now I know everything. And I think that a part of it, as a result of that, I have become less ideological in a way. I've become less strident in my views. And I've become more interested in talking to people who I wildly disagree with, but doing it in a sort of pleasant way if it demands it, and just trying to kind of learn from people. But before, I knew the answer to everything, but I didn't know the answer to everything. And when you know the answer to everything, you start hitting people harder. No, that's wrong. I'll tell you what's right. And there's something really obnoxiously pompous about that. And to get away from that has been something that has not been by design. I'm not a good person because of this. It's literally just over time, I've realized the things that I've been wrong about. And more life experience is if you're looking at that table of, what you were right about, what you were wrong about, objectively, and everyone does it objectively on their own. If they're just thinking about it on their own, you're not going to lie to yourself about this stuff. You realize that, maybe I should relax a little bit about some of these things, and maybe I'm not right about these things. But now in this world, I have friends that have now become political because of various things. And they're in the stage that I was, I think, when I was 19, because they're telling me what's right all the time on text. So, So yeah, that's just a speculation. I don't know, but that way of doing journalism, which was more combative, is I've just become less of that, and I think there was seeds of it in the General Lehrer story of not liking to have any sort of power over somebody's fate or anybody's future as a journalist. And I don't really have that, but if you come across something and you see someone in the commission of a crime and you have the ability to either shut up about it and I have shut up about it at certain times since, and reached out to people, one person in particular privately, and said, this is a little too close, by the way, you should maybe watch out for that and not set them on fire in public, because it's a bad feeling. So.
You talk about how it bothered you when you felt like people were being disingenuous, and that you are or were a stickler for like precision and for, accountability. Would you say that you are less of that today, or like how do you like maintain your, and like how do you define what you're, how do you be a journalist with integrity without being like combative or like how do you do that now?
No, I mean, it's a good question, because I think one of the things that John was interested in So You've Been Publicly Shamed is, at some point I told him, and I remember telling him this, and I this is when you can see the journalist's eyes light up, and I'm like, oh fuck, he likes this.
No!
I don't want him to like this. He's writing this down. But we were having lunch, and John is basically a model of how to do journalism. Very, inquisitive and very kind, and asks all the right questions and really digs into things. And, he was the only person that could have, I think, made me open up about how I felt about that story. And everybody else who I talked to about it was interested in the mechanics of it. Like, how'd you discover that he was bullshitting? What was it like when such and such happened? John was more interested in like, just the sort of human drama of it and the two people involved. Everyone's talking about Jonah losing his career, and there's the other person involved, which was me. And one of the things I told him, to your point, was that the reason I hated plagiarism so much and did so many of those stories was having these people, because journalism is really hard. There's parts of it that are super easy that people, misunderstand. Interviewing people like on camera is pretty easy. The hardest part of that is getting them to sit down. Right. It's impossible to get people to sit down. And especially the big people you want are too big to need you. So why do they want to sit down? So that's hard. But the act of writing, and your husband and you and both have written books, and it's painful. It's really painful. And people who wrote, William F. Buckley, famously was a very fast writer, and he wrote 60 odd books in his life and wrote like 2 columns a week. And I once saw him on C-SPAN or something, and somebody said, the process of writing, he said, I absolutely hate it. It's the most painful thing in the world. And, as some famous wag once said, nobody likes writing, everybody likes having written. The process,
absolutely.
Awful. And so when I see someone cheating, I get like mad about these things. I have this weird thing for fairness in these, whereas my daughter knows that if I ever see anyone littering, she has to like restrain me because it's the dumbest crime. Like if you robbed a bank,
why?
I get it.
Why? Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're gonna get money. Like you're just a fucking trash can. What are you doing? There's rules. I'm just like nut. Like there's rules. And this is kind of the way I feel about writing, is that I check everything that I write 50 times to make sure it's correct. And, and then now we're in a culture that far from that General Air story, which I think was 2013, I guess. I don't even remember, 12, 13, 14. We're at a place that people, pop off on Twitter constantly. We have a president that pops off regardless if something's true or not. And it's a different world. And it's a hard world to be in when you care about these things. And I don't care about them because I'm a more moral person. It's because I'm a more fearful person. The idea of getting caught being wrong terrifies me. And it's not because I'm better at this or worse at this or a better person. I'm not at all. I'm a worse person in almost every way if we're using other metrics. But this one is a fear that to get something wrong is public humiliation. It's what John was writing about.
Do you fear more being wrong, or do you also fear being right, but being attacked for being right?
Oh, that's also a good question. I mean, both of those are weird fears. I mean, back again to this Charlie Kirk thing, because it's what's obsessed the news cycle for the past week plus, is that I have gotten angry about the throat clearing, where people say, well, I really disagreed with him. But wait, why? Why are you saying that? A man has been assassinated in front of his family, leaving 2 young children fatherless because he had views. And you have to say, well, because I didn't agree with them. It's like, what is that? Why are you appending that? It's because of the fear that people have of appearing to have the wrong views in public. We are in a really, really crazy era of like tribal groupthink. And I find it really unnerving. And, my fears of getting things wrong and getting things right, or, I think it's more common with the people that I've worked with, younger people, journalists, and even myself. I have to restrain myself. The fear of not being right or being wrong, with being on the wrong side or being with the wrong people.
Right.
Bad people can have correct ideas sometimes. And what matters is whether they're correct, not whether the messenger of them is a bad person. I can like your band if you have a tattoo of Stalin on your chest. That might be a little weird, but I like that. I like that song. It's like separating the art from the artist. It plays into kind of all the things that I see as like kind of forever problems now, which is people really, really being fearful to be on a certain side of an issue. And the way that I've discovered this is the podcast that I do, The Fifth Column, which I've been doing for almost a decade now. And we have a very big and lively audience, and we love them all. They come from all sorts of different political perspectives. But during like 2018, 19, 20, so the tail of the Me Too and then the George Floyd era, where everything was going a bit crazy, right? People were afraid of getting fired for things. The number of emails that I would get and direct messages that I would get from people who were like legitimately well-known, a lot of actors and things like this saying, hey, I don't, just between us, and this is between us, love the podcast. I'm like, between us? I don't do what kind of podcast do you think I'm doing? Some sort of white nationalism? Good Lord. We're just being boringly commonsensical. But I noticed in that period that right or wrong was irrelevant to people. It was sort of outward perception of things and how people treated them. I mean, the number of people in industries where it was kind of a political monoculture that didn't want to talk about it. It's like, but you share views with 50% of the population, 60% of the population. Why are you afraid of that? And then I realized I understand why they're afraid of it, because there are consequences to some of these things. But I would say for me, it's that, my fear of being wrong is just a normal fear of getting something wrong. In the same way, raising your hand in high school and college was difficult for me because I was nervous about getting something wrong and being humiliated. But I think more than anything, that the dominant thing that I see is people not caring whether they're right or wrong, but the perception of them in public, regardless of whether they're right or wrong, if they're on the right side of things. Because, heroism in these times is, or just in any time, is very rare. People don't want to stand up for what they believe in because they fear the financial consequences, social consequences. And I get that, but I think that's the dominant kind of fear that people have.
Okay, so how do you maintain journalistic integrity when there's so much fear around it? Why don't you just do something else.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's also, I have a friend who's a journalist. She texted me yesterday and we were talking about all these lunatics out there, the Candace Owens and all these people with conspiracy theories. And she said, I want to go back to waiting tables. That was the exact quote. I want to go back to waiting tables. It's too crazy. But technology, the brilliance of technology has allowed me to do it because, my bank account is entirely dependent on the people that listen to the show. And it's amazing. I mean, I pulled so many punches when I was at the Daily Beast, when I was at Vice. I didn't want to speak up too loud because I had a baby when I was at the Daily Beast. Then I had a 5-year-old when I was at Vice. And just like the only thing I'm worried about, I got to pay the bills and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, there are people who like you in this crazy atomized society that we have and will pay for it. And you don't fear them at all. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, in this sort of, Tucker Carlson type cases, and somebody who I knew a long time ago, I think that is too liberating, and they kind of play to the lowest common denominator and play to the conspiracies because there's a certain amount of audience capture there. But, this is true of Katie Herzog, who you had on the show, who's somebody I absolutely love, and I'm very mad at her for quitting drinking because I think it's pathetic and she should start drinking again. Because when she comes to New York, it's like, I'm going to have a fucking tea with you? Boring. But
you
that's
can
her.
drink whatever you want. So.
Yeah, I know, but then you're humiliated. Like, you're supposed to be humiliated at the same time. You get drunk, I get drunk, and we say dumb shit and no one remembers. When the sober person's there, it's harder. I love Katie. That's a joke. I'm happy for her. But, Katie and Jesse Singal do Blockchain Reported, which is a great, fun, funny, interesting show. Nobody in this sort of mainstream media, and these are two people that come from the mainstream media, would put that show on, and they did it on their own, and they're successful on their own, and it takes away the fear. I mean, you're fearful of things, and you're mostly fearful of your livelihood, is that there's a lot of blacklists. There's a lot, people don't, when we talk about McCarthyism, it's like there's a lot of that over time. And even before McCarthyism, by the way, in Hollywood, there were blacklists of people who were not on the right side of politics. These go on for a long time. And the blacklists are what you fear. And they're unspoken sometimes. And just like, this happened to me at certain institutions that I worked at. They wouldn't put me on certain stories because they didn't want that. And, it wasn't that they didn't think I was fair or something like that, but they thought that I had an opinion that was probably the wrong one. And so I would conform to that stuff and I would admit to it, and I'm ashamed of it. And
that's so interesting because it's not like you're known for being a conformist. You're kind of known for being an anti-conformist. At least that's what I think of when I think of you.
Yeah. Well, I think that at Vice, for instance, is a good example of this, is that I had one producer. There's always like one person in this kind of mind prison who comes over and knocks and says, and can be helpful. And there was somebody who was like that for me. But I was taking off stories. I was, very strongly suggested that I shouldn't do or pitch certain stories. But I always think that when I did them down the middle and pretty fair. But the only stories that I did when I was at Vice that people would think that would match up to, my priors, my ideology, I can think of maybe 2. And I did a lot. 2. I did one about Evergreens, the university in your state.
Neck of the woods.
Yeah, it is full of crazy people.
Isn't that Oregon, though?
No, it's Olympia.
It's Olympia. Oh, yeah.
And I did a story there, and I still played that totally down the middle. But I didn't do anything political because I knew my place. It was made very clear. It's not like I had a document that someone said, don't do this, Moynihan. But, there was skepticism. Institutions are captured and they're ideologically captured, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. That's your business. And it was entirely my business to work there or not. And the opportunity was too good. And I did pull punches. And I think that was something that I really regret. I really regret. And I've never said that publicly, but I really regret some of the choices that I made. I don't think the pieces I ever made were dishonest ever. But I think that I would have gone harder on certain stories, or maybe changed the focus, or allowed people to guide the story in a certain direction. Because there's always a chain, this is a different thing than when you're doing a Substack or whatever. The chain is, it hits these parts of the chain, and there are people at the top that ruin everything. And there's a great letter that's out there, you can find it, from Back to the Future, the movie Back to the Future. They've been shooting it, and the suits, the executives said, okay, we like the movie, but we hate the name, which by the way is a great name. And they suggested something, it was like something, it was something from Mars. It was like some space
something
people. It was so
totally
insane.
Irrelevant to what the
you would think it was fake. It was like, no, it's great, but it's got to be called Space People from Mars or something. And that's always the example.
We love the movie that has nothing to do with Mars, but okay,
it was
okay.
As you get up the chain, everything gets dumber, and I didn't push back on that as much as I should have. And so it's a. I don't know. I mean, I now the independence, back to the original point, is what liberates us, liberates all of us. Amanda Knox doesn't need to have somebody from CBS coming and say, oh, I saw the cut of the thing that you did with Moynihan. Here's what I think we should do with it. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You have your husband. I don't know if is he a pain about it?
No, I'm the one who's the mostly like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Poor Chris, man. I got to text him. Like, dude, you okay? Can you send a smoke signal if everything's okay?
You should check in on him every once in a while. I'm always very pro him having some bro time because he spends a lot of time with me in the office.
I'm going to fly out there and just liberate him and just get on the boat. We're going. We have to go. Amanda's driving you insane.
We joke about, or your journalist friend joke about how wanting to go back to waiting tables, but as much as media institutions are ideologically captured, it feels like more and more all institutions are ideologically captured in one way or another. So it's not like you're safe waiting tables per se.
No, not at all. And I think that the Trump administration stuff that you're seeing is a direct response to it. And I think their responses are terrible oftentimes. I mean, the Jimmy Kimmel, which happened yesterday, is a great example of that. I don't love their responses. And, that's why I was talking to Greg Lukianoff this morning, somebody who is, the most principled man I've ever met in my life. I mean, it doesn't matter what your belief is. He will defend you if he feels like your freedom of speech is being infringed upon. But if we were actually looking at the sort of root causes of this stuff, the backlash was a long time coming because people didn't feel that they could be honest in their places of work. Do you think I can be honest with the parents at my daughter's school? They can Google me and figure out. I love saying this because it makes it sound like I'm Nick Fuentes or something. I'm like the most boring person in the world. I have a very center, middle of the road in a lot of issues. But I talk to everyone, which is even itself a problem. Why do you go on X show? Why wouldn't I?
Yeah, I've been accused of that as well. Like, why would you go on? I've had people, especially when I went on Joe Rogan. That's when I got the most sort of like, why would you ever go on that show? And it's like, because I can communicate my ideas to people. Like
millions of them. Millions. It's crazy.
Who should hear what I have to say.
If you go on there and you're saying, I'm drinking hydrochloroquine this morning or something. If you're saying something that people are specifically upset about, fine. But I was in a green room at a news channel one time, and about 15 years ago, and I was about to go on a show. And it's a true story. And the guy who's sitting next to me, another journalist who's become a friend of mine, I said, I'm really not super comfortable with this dude at this point. I think he's gone a bit crazy. And it was like this hair and makeup. He was in Washington, D.C. And he turned to me and it was the simplest. You need people to sort of communicate simple sentences to you sometimes. And he said, you're only responsible for what you say. That's it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. I might get, shit on by people. So why would you, this word that makes me vomit, platforming. It's like, we used to call, I was accused at Vice, I did a documentary about the 2020 election. And in doing that, I interviewed Steve Bannon. It was a very hard interview to get, by the way, because he hated Vice. I did too. So I told him I hate him. Let's get together because we both hate the place that I work. Important because he was running Donald Trump's campaign in 2016. He was the campaign manager at the exact same time. So I went and sat with him. It was the only interview, by the way, that I've ever stopped myself because it went on too long. I was like, Steve, I got to go. It's like 3 a.m. This is because he likes talking and he's pretty interesting and engaging. I find 99% of what he says to be completely bonkers, but that was the fun of it. And someone accused me of, someone shall remain nameless who will know exactly who they are, said, why are you platforming Steve Bannon? To which my response was, in this business, we used to call it interviewing. Because how do you know that Steve Bannon is a bad guy, quote unquote bad guy? Because he's been interviewed. Because you've listened to him on television, on radio, on podcasts, and that's what we're doing.
And it's not like he wasn't relevant. He was the
hugely
campaign,
relevant. Yes.
He was part of the campaign. It's not like you just plucked someone out of the ether who nobody knew existed.
And it was a kind of hostile interview because that's one of the ones and one of the people who invites it and they really enjoy it. And it wasn't as if I was saying Steve, why do you wear so many shirts on top of other shirts? I was literally asking him tough questions, and he ended up enjoying the interview because it was fun. That kind of interviewing is fun. He invited me to his house, and we watched the vice presidential debate, and we yelled at each other for 3 hours. And it was like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what journalism is supposed to be. But there became a point at which every institution, and this was very true of Vice. I wrote a very long piece about it for the Free Press about the kind of capture of Vice and how it effectively destroyed the company, is that, everywhere you go, there's people policing. And that instinct is not something that when you have George Orwell, writing about Oceania and Winston Smith in 1984, it's not as if there's some superstructure that just takes on and creates a brain. No, people do that. And people get together and do that because people have the instinct to do that. And that's what we have to guard against. I mean, that's what journalists do. That's what human rights advocates say. People are terrible. I mean, I had a guy on the show last night who was the head of the Human Rights Foundation. And he said the hardest thing to deal with as the Human Rights Foundation is that if you go back 30 years, these indices on democracies, we have fewer democracies in the past 30 years than we had 30 years ago. And to me, that's depressing, but not surprising in any way. It's like we're getting less democratic throughout the world. So why does that happen? Because people are garbage. We have to. It's
going to be the title of the episode.
Yes, people
are garbage.
Oh my God, it's literally, I mutter that to myself on the train every day. I can't believe someone hasn't institutionalized me. I'm like, garbage people everywhere. But anyway, a lot of muttering.
Okay, so I want to know, because I think a lot of people want to know, in this world that is highly offended and sort of obsessed with identifying, how do you cultivate intellectual curiosity?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I wasn't intellectually curious, I wouldn't have gotten into this business, which is not a good business to get into, period. A young AP working for me, and he said, I'm going to go to journalism school. And I was like, that's a huge fucking mistake.
You're never going to get paid back for that degree.
No, you're not going to pay back for that. They're going to teach you stupid stuff. Just do it on your own. But, the curiosity exists in places where there is more control of people's ideas or attempts to control what is mainstream and what is allowed to be discussed. In those places, if you're not being more curious as a result of that, you're probably doing something wrong. I think that this is another conversation that I had last night with this human rights advocate, and I said to him, a guy that we both knew, who was in a punk rock band from Cuba, called Porno para Ricardo. This guy they let him out one time, and then he got to go back to Cuba, and then he was arrested again. But he was in this punk rock band. And we were having this funny conversation because he's like, I love all these great punk rock bands from America in the 80s, like all these, DC bands and Minor Threat and these guys. And they're like, fuck Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan doesn't care. I say, fuck Fidel Castro. And I'm in prison for 2 years. And it's like that. those experiences, I mean, I'm talking to somebody who probably has a rather different view of the world had she not had the experiences that she had in Italy, that makes you think that when people are griping about certain things, what overwhelms you is, good God, could this be a lot worse? Good God, is that like, I mean, seriously, this is what you're concerned about? And that can be poisonous sometimes, and that can overwhelm you in bad ways. But I think that like talking to that guy and talking to people is like, oh, no, there's real stakes for me. You guys are just LARPing. This is just play acting. And these people that are out clotting the streets protesting X, Y, or Z, if they were doing that in a country that actually was a dictatorship, they probably wouldn't be out there very long. And so like the curiosity that I have is because I'm allowed to have it. I'm allowed to be curious. And I think that's the great thing is that, you know, I grew up like going to punk shows and straight edge shows, and I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm not like somebody who is the kind of text of like someone who's going to be like a conservative or something, you know, I'm not like, but I end up becoming more sort of weirdly patriotic because when you see, I had the opposite feeling of a lot of people. They go abroad when they're in college, or they go abroad when they're young, and they say, oh, look at how clean the trains are or something here. Yeah, sure. You should complain about that stuff. But, you know, look at the justice system in other countries, Amanda Knox, and realize that of the failings that we have here, which, you know, you and a million other people in Innocence Project, et cetera, do great work on, but you're not in Cuba, you're not in Venezuela. And I just am curious about how all this stuff works, because I can be and not be manacled and pushed into the back of a car for having curiosity, which is one of the great things about living in a free society, which I really appreciate. So.
Is that what you would recommend to people who aren't journalists and public figures, but who still fear judgment either from their peers or their family or their society? Like, is it merely the fact that it's like, look, you're not going to be imprisoned for your views. So go about, like, continue to be curious about things and share your views. Like, I mean, I think there still is a legitimate fear of wanting to belong and losing a state of belonging. But like, do you feel like that fear is do people over fear that the idea that they're not going to belong anymore to people if they have certain views? Do you find that there's always a community for people?
Always.
Yeah.
And a couple of things about this. My daughter started high school last week. And I've noticed this of like, she's meeting new people. She didn't go to the same school. It was starting in high school in a new school. And does this person like me? Why is this person texting me like this? Because now it's horrible. Like all the weird insecurities now come with the phone. And so she's like reading punctuation. She put a period after this. She said, this goes a right period. And I was like, period? It's the end of the sentence. It's like, well, it's not really a sentence, but it's like, oh, but that means something. So the fear that we have of group acceptance is something that is instilled in you very, very young. And I'm seeing this in real time. And I forgot about what it was like for me. It's like all these memories, like, oh shit, I remember when I was in high school and I was, you know, worried about these things. But as far as, I mean, we say on the Fifth Column all the time, Camille, one of the co-hosts, someone asked him, Camille is black, but refused to call himself black. It's a very complicated thing. But he makes a very good case for it. He made the case on Bill Maher's show one time. But he said when someone wrote in, you know, it was during the George Floyd thing, he said, I don't know about this stuff. I think it's wrong. I don't know. And Camille's response was, be brave, call bullshit. And that's been the motto, like, be brave, call bullshit. Because what you find is that there are a lot more people who aren't brave, but also want to call bullshit, and then will come to you very quickly and become your group of friends or allies. And I noticed this in the biggest way, and I think it's probably the thing that I've said most since covering various Trump campaigns, is getting to know people who were big Trump supporters, like very, very diehard Trump supporters, and becoming very, you know, friendly with them and sympathetic to them in ways that are not necessarily political, but they're just, you know, and I think the example always was when I went to a rally and I was talking to a woman and she said she was here to meet her friends. And I said, oh, well, who are your friends? Are they high school friends, whatever? And she said, oh, no, I don't know them. And I was like, wait, what? They said, oh, no, we have like a Facebook group. And these are people like in their 70s. And it's like, oh, this whole thing is providing community. And so when they say, you chant something and you ask them, like ideologically, what is, they might know, they might not know. I don't want to be condescending to say that they don't. But conservatism, when all these pundits are saying it's changed so much from Reagan to now, it used to be free trade, it used to be free markets. And now these people are like, yeah, they don't care. It's a community for them. And they enjoy the community so much that they talk about friends they have not physically met because there are Facebook groups that they're part of. And I've long talked about something that I call ideological dementia. If the people are otherwise reasonable, it's like, this old thing, Fox News stole my dad's brain or something, or MSNBC stole my mom's brain. It's like, no, there's a loneliness. And as you get older, you need a purpose. And, I think there's a lot of, lack of religion things in here too, and as somebody who's an atheist. But people are trying to find that stuff. And it makes them deranged in some ways. And that becomes the anchor for them. They don't really care about politics, but it's the anchor in which they exist around the politics. And the politics is that kind of gathering point. So that's the most extreme example. But if you say, I don't want to be honest about X, Y, or Z, you will always find. And if you're more open about it, you become the beacon for some people. Like when people sort of knew what I thought about certain issues at Vice, the number of people that worked there that would come to me and be like, hey, by the way, I love the show. The show that I was doing at the time, because I was doing the podcast at the time. And that was my assumption was nobody listened to it at work. That was not true. Turned out not to be true. But yeah, being brave and calling bullshit, it's not only about, finding a peer group or finding people that reflect your views or, you want to have conversations with. It also makes you feel really good. It feels really good. When you're feeling down and you haven't accomplished anything, cleaning the house is great. I just accomplished something. There's a version of that, a psychological version of that, when you feel like you're out in the wilderness and you're just honest about it, and it gives you a sense of feeling brave about something, honestly, it's not bravery in the sense that you're running into, Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. It's a different type of bravery, but a personal thing to say, and again, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me was the podcast, The Fifth Column that I do, just because the groups of people that we have a huge audience that is very close. They have their Discord channels. We've had 3 or 4 marriages of people who met through The Fifth Column, and they're just great to figure out, because they're from all over the map, and to figure out like how those communities make people feel, because everyone always feels isolated, particularly in COVID. It was horrible this is the worst thing I'm ever going to say publicly. It was terrible for everybody but The Fifth Column. It was like the number of people that came to the show to find a place of community and to find a place where they could, reflect some of their ideas. That's like incredibly important. And I love it. That's what I love about doing what I do now, which is different than going out and just reporting,
So, be brave and call bullshit, but also you talked about how like at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about how there has also been a softening of your approach. So how does that play into all of this? How does that play into being brave and calling the bullshit, but also being capable, like not being the like aggressive stickler necessarily?
Amanda, this is like a Seinfeld episode. You tie all the things together at the end. You're like, that's from the beginning. You're a very good interviewer. I'm surprised.
Oh, well,
I'm surprised. I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but like I've never been interviewed by you before. I'm like, oh shit, she's good at this. That is a very good question. No, I think that when you realize that you can be a normal person and have a normal life, regardless of what you view, your views in politics or whatever. And of course, there are exceptions to this. If you're like a neo-Nazi, I want nothing to do with you and you can go fuck yourself. There are limits, and we should have those limits, and we should actually very brutally enforce those limits so that stuff doesn't drift into the mainstream, because that stuff's bad. But, and I could do another hour on why it's bad, so I'll ignore it. But I think that when you have that sense and feel like liberated to talk about what you actually feel about things, I don't care anymore. And I don't care about that, which is at the same time, as you've pointed out, made me a softer person because I'm less angry. I was so angry at the place that I worked, about people around me, at my daughter's school, at everything. And now I feel like so liberated by this. And that's because of our listeners, is because people will just pony up and they like what you do and they'll pay for you directly. And there's no middleman. There's no one saying it's space monkeys from Mars or whatever. I get to do what I want. And then people pay you directly. And if they don't like you, they walk away. And if they don't agree with you, like, look, we shit on Biden all the time for so many shitty things that he was doing. And then we started shitting on Trump and a lot of people left. And it's like, oh, I thought you were those guys. It's like, no, we're not those guys. We're a lot of different guys. And we might be pro this and nice to somebody that day and nasty the next day. But I also know that no matter what I say, I think that I can recover. And there'll be some other people that'll come to the show that like the tone or are feeling homeless. That's oftentimes I'm feeling homeless. And so we've come to you guys. But it is an odd thing in the past to think that if I was really honest about things, I would get a call. I would get a tap on the shoulder. I found a text message, an email the other day, screenshot. I mentioned this, and I won't mention the person who sent it to me, but it was in 2016. It was during the election, and we were piloting the Vice News Tonight show. And I was at some political event, and there was, on TV, there was a Bernie rally. And there was all these women. It was all women. They had these Bernie buttons on, like tons of them. And they were weeping. And I tweeted some obnoxious asshole thing about, the TGI Fridays employees weeping about Bernie or something. It wasn't ideological. And I got an email and said, we need to talk about this. I totally forgotten about this. And I went and talked to them. And I think I was so aggressive that they decided best leave them alone. But it was kind of trying to put me in the place at the beginning of the show of like, don't tweet things that might be. Meanwhile, everybody else was tweeting whatever the hell they wanted. But that kind of thing, I don't even think about anymore. And I'm not pissed off anymore. I just, you try to call them as you see them, and you live a sort of much calmer life without the sort of Damocles over you all the time. They're going to fire me. And because journalism is fucking hard. It's like you're at an investment bank. There's like 50 other investment banks that will probably hire you provided you didn't do something gross, right? This one is like, journalism is pretty small and it is kind of a monoculture. And if someone says this guy's not a good guy, it worries you. But now that I do it on my own, it's like John Ronson's a great example of that. Somebody, even before all this Substack and the rest of it, is somebody who carved his own path, became his own brand. I mean, one could only hope to be as successful and as talented as John. I'm not even close to claiming that. I would never claim that because he's a man in his own universe.
I know. He's like the one celebrity that I have a huge celebrity crush on.
Didn't he like officiate your wedding or something?
He was definitely at my wedding. I tried to get him into an official position, but he ended up having to leave a little early.
I can't really know this one. I can't do it, John. But you had somebody, I'm also going to text Chris about you had somebody at your wedding that you had a crush on. All right.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay, that's good. I mean, John is totally acceptable because he's also like, you get it. Like, men get it. I get it. So.
We all have a crush. We have a collective crush on John Ronson. How could you
Very
not?
big, yeah. Very big crush on John.
I'm so glad we wrapped it up that way. Where can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, I don't really tweet or much anymore because it's too crazy. But the Moynihan Report is a show that I launched, about 4 or 5 months ago. And it's been doing great. And we have people from all over the spectrum on it. And I got to go from here to record an episode with, Colby Hall, the guy who's founded Mediaite, that very popular website amongst journalists. And it's just all over. We just did one with Ari Aster, the director of Eddington, which is a really cool movie you should see if you haven't, and did Midsummer. So we try to do a bunch of stuff. And then the Fifth Column is going strong, and we're doing video, and you got to look at this ugly face.
There you go. You got to comb your hair. Comb that hair.
No, this is my elderly...
I also clearly have not combed my hair.
Oh, I thought that was a style.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a style?
This is so rock and roll right now.
Isn't that what it is? It's a rock and roll style. That's what I thought.
I guess.
Shit, I don't know anything. I'm so old
We're
and stupid.
grunge here in Seattle.
Yeah,
so
this is a very Seattle early 90s Temple of the Dog look. That's what I thought it was.
That's so intentional. Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Amanda.